All right, if you could tell by the thumbnail, we are doing the Cleveland Browns. Me and Seamus are excited about this.
Yeah,
Probably a little more than the other teams. Obviously, you probably know why. But um, to start off their draft, they made the trade of the draft, I'd say, as far as at least the surprising factor. The Jags trade up and get Travis Hunter, and they drop back. And I thought there was a chance they would go Genty. Shames to you. I know. I think we were texting. We didn't exactly know,
100%.
but
I texted you, I think when they were on the clock, or maybe when it was the fourth pick, because we were trying to think, me and my roommate, like, who are they going to pick right here? And it just clicked. I was like, are they going to go Genty? I don't know why I wasn't thinking of it whenever the trade first happened, but yeah, it clicked, and I was just like, I think they might go Genty here because we know the Browns notoriously like to pound the rock. They had Nick Chubb, who was a beast for so long. It kind of felt like naturally you get another kind of short, stocky running back in there to be the next guy, but they went Mason Graham, which I like the pick. Still, anytime you're beefing up the interior and getting arguably one of the best players in the draft, um, I think it's a solid pick. But I will say I was just so surprised that the trade happened. I just kind of thought that it was chalk to be uh, Cam Ward first, Travis Hunter second, and then Abdul third, and we got two of those. But I love it for the Browns. I'm on the same side as you. Um, I saw this guy John Middlecoff. He's a guy that does like podcasts for the NFL, and he's just good to listen to. But he said something that I kind of agreed with. He said that it's kind of insane that a GM that comes in and has literally never seen their team play ever, not a practice, nothing, comes and makes that big of a decision to give your first up next year because you just don't know how good like your team is. At the end of the day, you can watch as much tape as you want, but until you see them with your own eyes, I feel like it was kind of crazy that they did that. Now they got Travis Hunter, so I mean,
in
I
the
love
second
that
rounder,
they went
Seamus,
huh?
in the second round pick for this year,
Yeah, exactly.
which they got
Yeah,
a
and
baller with.
yeah, 100%. I think the Browns won this. If you're a Browns fan, I know you might have wanted Travis Hunter. He's probably the best player in the draft. So the fact that the Jags went and got that guy is big, and their GM was saying some pretty bold stuff. I don't know if you saw that, but introducing him, and it seems like they're going to play him both ways. But this isn't like a lot, but this isn't a Jags video, so um, overall, I thought the Browns, just because of that trade, had a really good draft. I'm kind of surprised to see that they have PFF as the Browns as a C plus. I kind of disagree with that. I thought they had a good draft, but yeah, I think this was a good pick.
Yeah, Seamus, and to get into the grades on these guys, Mason Graham is probably going to be one of those guys where we see the numbers just pop off the screen off the rip. But 6'3", 320. Uh, dude, yeah, let's just pull up the grades. I think PFF said in the paragraph under him, um, highest rated run grade last year out of all interior defensive linemen. That's
Yeah,
pretty
that's
good.
huge.
Yeah, the Browns are already elite at stuffing the run. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, you could see on his grades right there. Other than his first game against Fresno State, which I guess was just kind of a stinker for him, but he had either just kind of solid games or really good games. This was a guy that was hyped up last year coming in. Um, right after the draft happened, they come out with way too early mock drafts and stuff, and this was a guy who was projected to go this high, and he kept his stock there. So it's pretty huge, I think, and you get the best D tackle in the class, most likely. I think that's a good
that's a
haul,
safe.
and then you get
Yeah,
a first rounder next year.
in that second, man. I know we're going to get into what they did with that pick, but you see the progression, even as an elite player like him, just the growth. Big jump from freshman to sophomore year, and then, man, I don't even think we need to talk too much about this dude. I think everybody knows how good he is, and pairing him with Miles Garrett, man, it's going to be fun to watch. Hopefully, they hit on these other picks, and that kind of helps. Uh, Miles Garrett they're claimed to be a Super Bowl contender now, but um, yeah, their
Yeah,
next
we'll see
pick,
about
yeah, we'll see about that. I think the money was talking there, but
that. Yeah,
we love this
I
next
don't
pick
blame
too.
him.
Me either, dude. First
Yeah,
pick of the second round. I'll start by saying, Seamus, we thought we'd see Shador right here. We thought we'd see him here or a couple picks later, but everybody knows how that went.
yeah. Talk about being off on mock drafts. We were about 130 picks off or something like that.
Yeah.
But I like this pick right here, though. You get probably the second best off the ball linebacker in the class behind Jahad Campbell, who kind of fell a little bit, but I guess it's not too surprising because he's a linebacker, kind of an undervalued position, but he's basically a first rounder, first pick of the second round.
Yep.
Um, I know that Jim Harbaugh was super in on this guy too, and I feel like anytime Jim Harbaugh's bought in on a guy, especially at linebacker, I like him, and um, yeah, I just think this is a solid addition. The Browns have a good roster. The fact that they're picking second is clearly evident of how bad their quarterback situation has been, and they just added a lot more talent to their roster this year.
Yeah, this guy, the grades aren't insane, Seamus, but the pass coverage, the run fits, the tape I saw on him, dude, he's just putting his face in the gap, and that's just a good good guy to have at Mike. A couple will early in the season, played a little bit of will, and it seemed to
Yeah,
be where his grades weren't great. So he is a true Mike, and um, dude, yeah, the Browns have been. I can't say that I can think of their guy off the dome. It was Mac Wilson for a little bit.
yeah.
Um,
Putting this dude next to JOK is going to be fun to watch too.
yeah,
One thing that popped out off the screen to me, Dylan, though, is look at his pass rush grades. I don't know, how much he's
yeah,
rushing the passes, but he's looks like he's pretty damn good at it.
yeah. You always love that, especially in those mug situations. It's nice. Seems like when you're mugged up, and by mugged I mean when linebackers line up just on the edge of the center, um, and a lot of times they like act like they're going to come and they bail, but
Yeah,
that could be a good mug linebacker if he's truly winning on blitzes and blocks. But
yeah,
he's a guy that really freaking broke out his junior year, man, and you could see it right here in the grades. Obviously, he got a lot more snaps, but um, very very fortunate that he was able that UCLA believed in him, man, because he just made the jump snap wise, and he just produced, man.
yeah. You could see that he rushed the passer 62 times, so not a huge sample size, but you know, kind of a similar split to what he might do in the league, rushing the passer. So, also, you just love to see a story like this, like barely played his freshman and sophomore year, then just absolutely became a stud. So, shout out to this dude for breaking out like that and, you know, becoming
Yeah,
a guy that is probably going to be a impactful player off the rip.
yeah, and like you said earlier, basically a first rounder in one season.
Yeah.
Um, this next pick. for them wasn't Shador Sanders. Um, this
Yeah,
was
we
the
got
pick they also acquired from the Jags, but it's one of my favorite, probably my favorite running back in the class. We don't have his grades, but we know exactly who this guy is, Seamus.
yeah, Quinshawn Judkins, one of the greatest names of all time, right there.
Yeah, freaking north south pounder. Seeks contact. I mean, truly, he's looking for it, dude. If he's on the goal line and he knows he can just reach it over, he's gonna put a shoulder or the crown of his helmet on your dome piece on the way in. Like this is the runner that he's an old school kind of runner in my opinion, and he can catch the ball and he's fast. Low pad level. He's 6 foot. I think that's the ideal size for a power back because you can get low and he's 220. He's got the weight to take on the hits. It's not just a mental thing for him trying to take on these type of hits. He can actually take them on. And dude, he's versatile. I am excited to see what this dude does behind that Brown scheme and offensive line. Hopefully, they get a little bit of a passing game going. But Quinshawn Judkins,
Yeah, and they executed, kind of perfectly what me and Dylan have mentioned in our mock drafts about, we kind of thought that they're going to pick Genty once they traded down, but the depth of this running back class is crazy, because if you look at it, Mason Graham is a lot better than the D tackles that were available with this pick right here. But I feel like Quinshawn Judkins isn't, that far off from Ashton Genty. And I really like him too. Maybe I didn't watch enough of, Omarion Hampton, but I almost this whole time really like this dude even more than him. Um, you know, there's a reason he was a 36 pick, and that's because he's a dog. And I think both those Ohio State running backs are going to be really good in the league. But this dude should be excited he went to the Browns because he almost seems like the next Nick Chubb replacement. Like they're just going to put him in there and he's going to be a workhorse for him off the bat.
yeah, I can't imagine Jerome Ford gets a lot of touches with this guy in this game, and even with one of their other picks, which we'll get into. But for their next pick, they
Yeah,
got Harold
man,
Fannin
I'm gonna
Jr.
look for Quinshawn in fantasy. By the way, just one last thing about that dude. I like him for fantasy.
Yeah, he definitely has a big fantasy, a lot of fantasy upside, and I'm curious on David Njoku's outlook now that they have Harold Fannin Jr. This dude
Yeah,
very good at catching the ball and getting in open space, and dude freaking running with the ball after the catch. 6'4",
yeah,
230.
yeah, Dylan. I was always a big Harold Fannin fan. Shout out the Mac. I just had always seen that he was putting up crazy numbers for a tight end in college football, and so I would pay attention to him. And I just I think he has some solid potential to be the Ninjoku. I don't know about replacement because that dude he's broken out to be one of the better tight ends in the league. But I mean, he has a production, obviously not against the greatest competition, but you'll still take it. And um, yeah, I just like what he did this year, and he has a good chance to produce as the tight end too off the bat, straight up.
Yeah, and honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if he does so well that you know Njoku becomes a potential trade guy. I wouldn't be surprised. Dude, that's an interesting situation, especially in terms of fantasy. But the next guy
Yep.
is a quarterback, and Seamus, to no surprise, it's not Shador Sanders. Um, I actually saw today that there's a chance that this was their guy the whole time. Dylan Gabriel. He had a dinner with him before the Browns went to the showcase in Colorado, and no one reported it and no one knew about it. So there's a chance that uh, there's a real chance he was their guy all along. But I like Dylan Gabriel. He's a lefty. He played it. I thought he played well at Oklahoma. They just didn't have the best scheme. Not a lot of guys around him. It's my opinion. I know I'm getting Oklahoma State, but he went to Oregon, so we're not too much of a hater. But he did well, and with the exception of the Ohio State game in the playoffs, um, not a lot of bad things to say about him, dude. Honestly,
Yeah, a lot of comparisons to like to a light kind of thing, and
yeah,
no, it makes sense. I'm never in love with a guy with not a necessarily great arm by any stretch of the imagination playing in the AFC North, where you're gonna have to have bad weather games a lot during the back half of the year. But this is just the mindset at this point in the draft for me at least was just like, what is happening? Because I just thought, I mean, the fact that Shador slipped to where he did is crazy. And, once this is one of those picks where they picked him over Shador, Dylan Gabriel, that is. And man, that was a shock, I would say.
yeah.
But their quarterback situation now is very interesting to say the least. But I know we'll talk about Shador when that comes up, but that's one of the crazier storylines that I've ever seen in the draft.
Honestly, it's not. It was surprising, but once it got to this point, I think we all were really confused to where Shador exactly was going to go. I don't know, man, but Quinshon Judkins definitely is a lock. But in terms of fantasy, I question it because of Dylan Sampson, Seamus, because he
Yeah,
is
that's
he is
right.
no he is no guy to just sit behind and let things. He's this dude's a baller too. This dude has a lot of passing upside in the passing game or receiving upside in the passing game. But dude, this dude's quick. He didn't test well or as well as I think he could have with hamstring, I think it was, injuries, and maybe having Quinshon, it gives him a little time to heal up and get right. But dude, this dude's a baller too, and I'm not just saying that because we have the same name, but um, dude, I thought Denver was going to get him, and I was ready for that too. But what do you think about Dylan Sampson?
Yeah, I completely forgot they got this dude. That definitely is a cut in the Quinshon's load. Um, you know, I agree with you. He was one of those guys where he was one of those guys you would mention when talking about how deep this class is because I mean, as we know, running back's a position that there's great guys that get picked, down the draft board and in the late rounds. So I could see this guy being another one of them. And I just like that they basically completely rebuilt their running back room. Um, I think it's a good value pick for the fourth round because, like you said, he saw it in the past game, so he's probably going to come in right away and be a guy that you know is going to be productive and help the squad out.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what happens. I love Quinshon a lot, dude. And when I saw that pick, I was thinking fantasy, fantasy, fantasy. But then I saw Dylan Sampson, and I was like, wait.
Yeah,
So we'll probably do a video on fantasy and probably rank different things. But for now, let's get to the headliner of the draft. Not
yeah,
that we are in support of it being the headliner, but I was happy to see him get drafted, especially after seeing that terrible prank call, dude. Um,
yeah. That's some dickhead shit.
yeah, definitely a hard watch.
Yeah, Dylan, and this is like you said, the storyline of the draft. Shador Sanders falling to the fifth round, the 144th pick. This is a guy that early on that we in the kind of draft process we were talking about as the second pick to this very team, the Browns, and they go and pick Dylan Gabriel, and you know after that they pick Shador 2 rounds later, and I just think this is so interesting because you pass on him. I think this is their sixth pick that they had. So you pass on him 5 times and pick someone that is the same position as him. I've never seen anything like this before, and I like the. I think it is great value. I think he's probably the second best quarterback in the draft, in my opinion. But in terms of how it's going to work out with Cleveland, I'm very skeptical just because of how this worked out. But I'm hoping that this is kind of a wake up call, if you will. Even though he works hard and he's a tough dude, solid prospect, but I guess these NFL teams didn't like him at all, clearly. And it felt like a message to him almost. I don't know how you felt about it, but it felt like a message that, you know, apparently he didn't do well in many meetings, acted like he didn't care, something like that, which, we never know what was said there. But if there's any truth to that, it definitely kind of feels like this was a thing where the owners and GMs and coaches were like, we don't need you, and we're not even going to think about drafting you. So the quarterbacks that were drafted above him are questionable, which kind of feeds me to believe kind of what I just said. But um, yeah, overall, value wise, I think it was great, but I just am very interested to see how this works out over, the course of his career. And yeah, it's just crazy. I don't know what you think, but I just haven't seen anything like that before.
I think that teams mutually agreed unintentionally to let him fall a little bit. I don't know if that's just because how they valued him or what, but at the same time, I think it got harder to pick him because you have to live with why you didn't draft him sooner almost.
Yeah,
So I think that was there too, but um, I don't think it was the meetings. I've heard different things, but a lot of people just like the other guys more. Dylan Gabriel, there's a valid reason to like him more as a quarterback for your team than Shador, and he's going to come in as a backup. It's like why no one wanted to sign Cam Newton as a backup. It's such a big personality to have as a backup, but I think Shador could take that backup role and do something with it and maybe progress into something, despite what people think how he's going to act about that. But I think that's the guy you want. You want a competitive dude. You want a guy that's a big personality because everyone loves an authentic person, and he can be somebody that the locker room can get behind if he can walk the walk. And if he does walk the walk, then you freaking hit, dude. I think that's why they picked him. And I think, dude, that's a deep QB room. I think somebody's unfortunately going to get cut. But I like this pick. I'm not going to go back, Seamus, but PFF ranked them a C plus. I disagree, man. I think they had one of the better. I think it might be a C plus because they didn't have a bunch of picks. But dude, the trade, I like the trade. I think that was the
me
best
too.
trade. Not the best. Best trade in draft was probably the Rams, but this trade was really good for them. And next year's class is really deep. And maybe they didn't figure out their quarterback this year, but guess what? If you didn't, you got two first next year. So
100%. And if you didn't figure the quarterback out, that probably means that their pick next year won't be that great, and there's just no guarantee that the Jags will be good next year either because they have a first
great point.
time coach, first year coach, and just a lot of question marks. Trevor Lawrence, you never know how he's going to do. Kind of a seems like one of those make or break years for him, but I think he'll do well, and it also makes me think that there's a solid chance that maybe down the line a team might trade for him or something, him or Dylan Gabriel
Yeah,
as kind of a young option. So it'd probably be Shador before Dylan Gabriel, but I think that's something that we could be looking at, being talked about in the future.
100%. I hope our listeners aren't Shador haters. We're rooting for them. We're rooting
Yeah,
for all these guys, actually, but we'd love to
yeah.
see the turnout. And if you stuck around and you liked the video, subscribe. We appreciate it, and we hope you enjoyed the video.
Yeah.
Go Browns.
Shout out Browns Nation.
Yeah.
Thank y'all.